Noche UFC O'Malley versus Dvalishvili. This weekend we have possibly the worst, greatest card of all time. Obviously, I'm just saying that because Dana White promised this Sphere event was going to be the greatest UFC event in history, never to be topped again. And I would argue that it's not better than UFC 300. Regardless, should be an awesome card. Definitely some banger fights in here. Let's get right into it. First off, we have Raul Rosas taking on Aoriqilenga. Let's be honest, there's no way Raul Rosas is losing here. I think he's just going to have too much of a grappling edge. There's no way the UFC is going to give a Mexican fighter, one of their top prospects, leading off the card, anybody who they're not going to just run through. So I think Rosas is going to win this one by submission, and I think he's going to make it look easy. Next up in the flyweight division, we have Édgar Cháirez taking on Joshua Van. Van is kind of rushing into another fight here after he did get KO'd by Charles Johnson. We did pick Charles Johnson in that fight because Johnson had the length on him, and we felt that his power could give Van some issues. Well, Cháirez has a little bit of length on Van as well. He's a slightly taller guy. Cháirez is definitely pretty physically imposing, I'd say. Bigger, strong, one of the bigger, stronger guys in the flyweight division. Definitely has poses a grappling threat as well, coming off of a submission win. I worry about Van rushing into this fight so quick after getting obviously hurt by Charles Johnson. He's a young guy. He could have afforded to take a little bit of time off, but I think he's going to be the better striker out of these two. He's going to have the faster hands. And Cháirez didn't show me a whole lot to make me believe that he can just control Van, take him down, and submit him. So I think Van is going to win this one by decision, primarily relying on his striking. Next up, it is Yazmin Jauregui taking on Ketlen Souza. Souza is a big underdog here. Jauregui obviously was a massive prospect. Took a pretty surprising loss to Denise Gomes when she got KO'd real quick. Denise Gomes is one of the only people in this division who can hurt you like that. I don't knock her too much for that. We've seen Ketlen Souza get taken down very easily in the past. I think Jauregui has that ability to take her down and control her if she pleases. If not, I think she can just keep it standing and outstrike her and land in the takedowns if they present themselves but not really force the issue. I think Jauregui wins the decision here. She's a really strong prospect. Souza did get her knee pretty much torn apart, it looked like, a couple fights ago. You wonder how much of an impact that's going to have as well. Jauregui by decision is the pick. Next up is Manuel Torres taking on Ignacio Nacho Bahamondes. This has Fight of the Night written all over it. Honestly, Manuel Torres versus fill in the blank is going to have Fight of the Night written all over it. The guy is so exciting. All of his wins have come by finish. He's kind of on Steve Garcia type of tear right now. I think he has a bit of a comparable game. He's looking for the finish always. And I think that's honestly, some people are going to worry about, gassing yourself out, things like that, getting caught. But I think some of these other fighters can definitely learn to be looking to deal damage in situations where sometimes you can see they clearly aren't. They're more going for a grappling position or something. Bahamondes is going to need to dictate the pace and use his length in this matchup if he wants to beat Manuel. I definitely could see him frustrating Manuel because he's so tall, so long, and Torres is going to leave those openings. That's just who he is. He's going to sell out to land a big shot. So that being said, we've seen Ignacio have trouble versus smaller guys in the past, guys like Ludovic Klein, who landed super clean. I think Manuel is just on such a tear right now. I don't really see Ignacio having the tools to stop him. We're taking Manuel Torres by KO here. Next up is Irene Aldana taking on Norma Dumont. This is a close matchup here. The betting line reflects that. Dumont is really solid. She's good everywhere. She's got solid grappling and good striking. We saw her outstrike Carol Rosa a few fights ago. I think Irene probably has the edge in the striking because that's really is her 1A, 1B game plan is to land on the feet. But I really worry about her ability to keep it standing here versus a grappler of Norma Dumont's pedigree. And Norma has also shown that when she takes people down, she knows how to keep them there. So we're taking Dumont to win that fight by decision. Next up is a flyweight matchup between Ronaldo Rodriguez and Ode Osbourne. Ronaldo did win his UFC debut versus Dennis Bondar. Didn't look super polished to me. Didn't really impress me much. We saw him get caught a few times by some, pretty wild overhand strikes that really shouldn't be landing. That he honestly left himself in bad situations to get hit by those kind of wild shots of Bondar. Ends up persevering. Definitely has a really strong grappling base and finds the rear naked choke to win his debut. Ode Osbourne on the flip side, his last two losses have come by rear naked choke. So logic would say that that is a distinct possibility here. I do think there's a lot of question marks about Rodriguez's striking abilities, though, that I would have liked to see answered before this matchup. Osbourne's the more experienced guy. He's been in the UFC. He's a career below 500 fighter. He's got more losses than wins. But we've still seen him handle himself in there, and he's looked better in the past than he has recently. He has that win over Charles Johnson, which has aged pretty well. I think if he can keep it standing, he can give Rodriguez a lot of issues. We're taking Osbourne by decision. Next matchup is Daniel Zellhuber taking on Esteban Ribovics. Zellhuber is coming off of definitely his best UFC performance versus Francisco Prado, a fellow Argentinian of Ribovics. Once he found his range, Prado had really no answer for Zellhuber. He landed pretty much whatever he wanted. Anytime it got close, he just blasted knees into Ribovics, or into Prado rather, and you could tell they were definitely hurting him. That was definitely his most impressive fight to me. Even though he has gotten finishes before and he didn't finish Prado, he came super close to getting a doctor stoppage. He just bloodied up the guy. Ribovics is similarly also coming off of likely his best UFC performance. Knocked out Terrence McKinney pretty cleanly. He's a guy who I think has a lot of potential, really solid striking. He can work the body. We hadn't really seen him mix the head kicks in a whole lot until last fight, but then what do you know? He lands one and puts McKinney out clean. Before that, we saw him get tested versus Loic Rajabov, I believe in what was his debut, and he lost that fight, but he definitely had his chances to get a finish there. This one's really tough. I think Zellhuber is a really tough matchup for Esteban, who gets a lot of his really damaging strikes off in sort of that medium range, where I think Zellhuber will be able to hit him and not get hit back. Esteban could make it interesting if he can, get within, the telephone booth range and work the body a bit and try and close the distance, but I think that's a really tall order. I think Zellhuber wins this one by KO. He's got the home crowd behind him. All the potential in the world, and Esteban, I think, could get frustrated and end up taking maybe a necessary risk and paying for it. Next up is Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. The fight that we've been wanting to see for several months now is finally here. Lopes obviously exploded on the MMA scene, and all it took was him going to war with Movsar Evloev and giving him a whole lot of trouble. He had 3 first-round finishes after that, and he's coming off of a decision win over Dan Ige, the guy who has never been finished before. Lopes is absolutely electric. He's always looking to end fights. He's a guy who I worry about his gas tank a little bit. Not saying that he has bad cardio, but you can see we've seen him sort of sell out before in fights, and if you're going to sell out like that and not find the finish, that could spell trouble here. especially when you're taking on a guy like Ortega who's going to want to dictate the pace. He's going to want to things going at his speed, which is a bit slower, more intentional, I guess. Ortega's a super tough guy, and he's got more UFC experience than Diego Lopes. And I think underratedly, Ortega might have the grappling advantage in this one. He is so strong, and we've seen Lopes get on his back, and I think Lopes can get a bit too comfortable back there. And versus a guy like Ortega, I think he can just control him. So we're giving Ortega the grappling edge there, and then I think it's going to come down to round 3 and who's going to have more juice left in that last few minutes of the fight. And in my mind, it's going to be Ortega, who's going to have paced himself a bit better and just be able to kind of push over that ledge and get the win. So we're taking Ortega by decision. Should be a sick fight. Our co-main event is a strawweight matchup for the title. It is Alexa Grasso, flyweight matchup for the title, rather. Alexa Grasso taking on Valentina Shevchenko. This is the third fight in the trilogy. We now have over 40 minutes of cage time between these two. In my mind, I think Shevchenko has been the better fight for a majority of those minutes, which obviously is not the clearest indicator of who's going to win the fight, but I do think that's significant. That being said, Grasso has had the bigger moments. She's had the knockdown in the rematch. She obviously had the submission win in the first fight. So to me, it seems like Grasso, big moments, Shevchenko, consistency. I see Shevchenko getting up early here. It seems like when both are at full strength, both are fresh, Shevchenko has looked like the better fighter. Her wrestling seems to be better. Her striking seems to be a bit better, although obviously Grasso seems like she might have a bit more power. But that being said, I think Shevchenko is going to get up early, and it's going to be up to her to be able to survive the onslaught from Grasso later on in the fight. Grasso is she's very opportunistic. We saw it in the first fight when she took Shevchenko's back and won by choke. It could easily happen in this one, so Shevchenko's really going to have to be on her P's and Q's for the whole 25 minutes, whereas Grasso, I don't think, is too afraid of the finish coming on the other side, even though obviously Shevchenko back in the day was as deadly as they came. We haven't really seen her get that violent finish in a few fights. Really tough one. It's pretty even on the books. I'm siding with the consistency of Shevchenko. I think she's got one more title run left in her, and this is kind of her last chance to do it. So Shevchenko by decision is going to be the pick here. She's going to go up early, and it'll be up to her to survive the difficult predicaments Grasso puts her in, because she's definitely going to get into a pickle or two during this fight. Finally, we have our main event. It is Sean O'Malley taking on Merab Dvalishvili. Honestly, to my surprise, when this fight was announced, you saw Dvalishvili being a pretty heavy favorite. I think I saw him at 2-1 at some point. Since then, it's kind of leveled out where I think Sean is a bit of a favorite going into this one. Merab's pace and wrestling is such a difficult matchup for anyone. You don't really see the Khabib comparisons get thrown out because he doesn't really find finishes the way that Khabib did. But I think just in their commitment to wrestling and that approach, there are some similarities. Like, they're going to just dive at your legs, and there's not much you can do to stop them from getting there. You kind of just have to try and keep it on the feet. So I can definitely see Merab landing some takedowns early here, but he doesn't really have that finishing threat. He doesn't really pose that big of a finishing threat. And on the flip side, you have Sean O'Malley, who absolutely is a KO threat at all times when it's on the feet. I think the first couple of rounds, you're going to see Sean struggle with the pace a bit of Merab. But listen, the fight starts standing at every single round, and there's no doubt that at some point Merab is going to be a bit tired from just selling out for takedowns, and I think Sean could definitely catch him. We saw him catch Aljamain Sterling, who has a much different fighting style than Merab, but obviously there are some similarities there. We saw Merab get caught by guys like Marlon Moraes. Even Henry Cejudo landed clean on his chin, and if Sean lands the same shot, I think we're seeing Merab go out. So I think Sean wins this one by KO. Obviously, Merab has freakish, like he's just not, he's not your average human being at all. The guy is definitely a confirmed psychopath, so who knows, maybe he's incapable of getting KO'd, but if you ask me, I think Sean is going to catch him and win this one by KO. So that is the breakdown. Thank you all for listening. We will catch you on the next one.